Good evening, and welcome to Rapid Report, your trusted source for sharp, in-depth global analysis where we go beyond the headlines and unpack the forces shaping our world. Tonight, we turn our focus to a relationship once considered unshakable, the strategic alliance between Canada and the United States. But beneath the surface of shared borders, shared history, and shared defense agreements, something significant is unfolding. Political rhetoric is intensifying. Tariff threats are resurfacing. Economic nationalism is once again dominating the conversation in Washington. And in Ottawa, a bold geopolitical recalibration appears to be underway. At the center of this evolving story is a dramatic strategic shift attributed to Mark Carney, described by analysts as a four-move counteroffensive designed to reduce Canada's structural dependence on the United States. This is not a defensive retreat. It is being framed as an assertive, calculated effort to construct what some call a sovereignty shield, a repositioning of Canada as an autonomous middle power deeply connected to Europe, Asia, and emerging global markets. As tensions rise over potential tariff escalations, and as debates intensify around the meaning of America First, many observers argue that what was once a slogan of strength is increasingly being questioned, even by Americans themselves. Has economic nationalism strengthened U.S. leverage, or has it pushed allies toward diversification? Is North America entering a new era of strategic recalibration? Tonight on Rapid Report, we break down the economic implications, the defense calculations, the energy geopolitics, and the long-term consequences of this evolving Canada-U.S. dynamic. This is more than a trade story. It is a turning point in how middle powers navigate an era of global fragmentation. Stay with us as we unpack the strategy, the risks, and the global ripple effects of this unfolding geopolitical shift. As of today, tensions between Canada and the United States have entered a new and uneasy phase. What was once considered one of the world's most stable bilateral relationships, defined by deep trade integration, shared defense architecture, and cultural proximity, is now marked by strategic recalibration, tariff threats, and political mistrust. At the center of this shift stands a bold and controversial geopolitical doctrine attributed to Mark Carney. Rather than adopting a defensive posture in response to renewed American tariff threats, particularly those associated with Donald Trump's economic nationalism, Carney is described as executing an offensive, four-move counter strategy. Its objective: reduce Canada's structural dependence on the United States, neutralize economic coercion, and reposition Canada as an autonomous middle power connected dynamically to Asia, Europe, and Africa. This is not a policy of retreat. It is a doctrine of sovereignty construction, what some analysts are calling a sovereignty shield, the current state of U.S.-Canada tensions. Recent rhetoric emanating from Washington has revived fears of punitive tariffs targeting Canadian steel, aluminum, energy exports, electric vehicle supply chains, and even agricultural products. The revival of aggressive trade language, echoing the earlier tariff disputes of 2018-2019, has reintroduced uncertainty into North American markets. The political dimension has grown sharper. Donald Trump's renewed America First framing has expanded beyond economic protectionism into a broader ideological stance that questions multilateral commitments, trade interdependence, and even traditional alliances. In response, Canadian policymakers are increasingly unwilling to rely on the assumption that proximity guarantees stability. What has changed is psychological as much as economic. Ottawa now views American unpredictability as a structural risk, and that risk demands countermeasure. The four-move counterattack: Carney's strategic reorientation. According to observers, Mark Carney's geopolitical vision unfolds in four coordinated movements: economic diversification, defense autonomy, energy realignment, and alliance expansion. Each movement serves the broader objective of insulating Canada from economic coercion while elevating its global role. Move 1. Trade diversification beyond North America. The first pillar of this strategy is aggressive trade diversification. For decades, approximately 3/4 of Canadian exports have flowed to the United States. This concentration has been both an advantage and a vulnerability. The Carney approach seeks to rebalance this dependency by accelerating trade integration with the European Union under CETA, Indo-Pacific economies through CPTPP expansion, strategic Asian partners including Japan, South Korea, India, and Southeast Asian nations, emerging African markets rich in minerals and energy demand. Rather than treating trade agreements as diplomatic symbolism, this strategy frames them as geopolitical armor. By broadening export destinations, Canada reduces the leverage of any single trading partner. Tariffs become less destabilizing when alternative markets exist. This is economic deterrence through diversification. Move 2. Defense and strategic autonomy. The second movement involves recalibrating Canada's defense posture. While Canada remains a NATO member and a participant in NORAD, the emerging doctrine emphasizes strategic autonomy within alliances. Increased defense investments, Arctic security initiatives, and cooperation with European and Indo-Pacific security networks signal that Canada intends to expand its operational partnerships beyond exclusive reliance on U.S. leadership. The Arctic dimension is particularly significant. As climate change opens northern sea routes, geopolitical competition intensifies. By strengthening its Arctic capabilities and engaging European allies, Canada reinforces its territorial sovereignty while reducing dependency on unilateral American security guarantees. Defense diversification mirrors trade diversification. It sends a message. Canada is allied, but not subordinate. Move 3. Energy sovereignty in supply chain. Realignment. Energy is the third pillar of this counteroffensive. Canada is one of the world's leading energy producers. Oil, natural gas, hydroelectricity, uranium, and critical minerals essential for battery and clean technology production. Historically, much of this energy has flowed southward. The new strategy emphasizes infrastructure expansion to global markets. LNG terminals enabling exports to Europe and Asia. Critical mineral partnerships with Japan and the EU. Clean energy corridors connecting to multiple continents. This move transforms energy from a continental commodity into a geopolitical instrument. If tariff threats target Canadian industries, Ottawa can leverage energy supply relationships elsewhere. Energy independence does not mean isolation, it means optionality. Move 4. Alliance expansion and political repositioning. The fourth movement is diplomatic and symbolic. Canada is positioning itself as a bridge power, deeply Western but globally engaged. By strengthening ties with African democracies, Indo-Pacific coalitions, and European strategic actors, Canada constructs what some call a networked sovereignty model. This model rejects binary alignment. It is not anti-American. It is post-dependent. The underlying philosophy is clear. In a multipolar world, resilience comes from networks, not reliance. A dramatic strategic analysis, offensive, not defensive. This strategy is often mischaracterized as a reaction. In reality, it appears proactive. Rather than waiting for tariffs to be imposed, Canada is building structural immunity. Rather than responding emotionally to political rhetoric, it is engineering long-term leverage. This is strategic judo. If Washington turns inward under the banner of America First, Ottawa pivots outward. If tariffs become weapons, diversification becomes armor. If unpredictability defines the southern neighbor, predictability becomes Canada's diplomatic brand. America First or America Alone? A growing number of Americans themselves are questioning whether America First has evolved into America Lonely. Allies unsettled by protectionist measures have sought alternative partnerships. European states discuss strategic autonomy. Asian powers hedge their economic exposure. Canada diversifies. This does not signify anti-American sentiment. It signals adaptive behavior. Global systems adjust when reliability fluctuates. The paradox is striking. In attempting to prioritize domestic strength through protectionism, Washington may be accelerating external diversification among its partners. Isolation rarely produces leverage. Interdependence does. The risks of the strategy. Carney's four-move counterattack is bold, but not without risks. Trade diversification requires time and infrastructure. Energy expansion faces environmental and political challenges. Defense autonomy demands significant spending. Diplomatic balancing must avoid alienating Washington entirely. Canada's economy remains deeply intertwined with the United States. Geography cannot be diversified, yet strategic dependency can be reduced. The question is not whether Canada can replace the U.S. It cannot. The question is whether it can rebalance the relationship. A sovereignty shield in a fragmenting world. The broader significance of this moment extends beyond North America. In a world where global supply chains are weaponized, where tariffs become instruments of political messaging, and where alliances are renegotiated in real time, middle powers face a choice: adapt or absorb. Carney's doctrine suggests adaptation through expansion. Canada does not seek confrontation, but it refuses vulnerability. It does not abandon partnership, but it rejects asymmetry. By constructing a sovereignty shield built on diversified trade, defense recalibration, energy leverage, and alliance networks, Canada aims to transform exposure into resilience, a new chapter in North American relations. As of today, the U.S.-Canada relationship stands at a crossroads. It is no longer defined solely by shared history and economic gravity. It is shaped by strategic recalculation. Whether this tension escalates into prolonged trade conflict or evolves into a renegotiated equilibrium remains uncertain. But one reality is clear: Canada is no longer content to be structurally dependent. And if America First continues to narrow its circle of trust, Canada appears determined to widen its own. The coming years will determine whether this four-move counteroffensive becomes a masterstroke of middle power strategy or a high-stakes gamble in an increasingly fragmented geopolitical order. One thing is certain: the age of automatic alignment is over. A new era of strategic sovereignty has begun. The structural forces driving the brake. To fully understand the magnitude of this shift, we must look beyond personalities and campaign slogans. The evolving tension between Canada and the United States is not merely about Donald Trump or Mark Carney. It reflects a deeper structural transformation in global power politics. Three forces are reshaping the bilateral relationship. 1. Weaponization of interdependence. 2. The rise of middle power assertiveness. 3. Fragmentation of the liberal economic order. For decades, economic interdependence was considered stabilizing. Trade reduced conflict. Supply chains created mutual reliance. But in the post-2016 world, and especially amid renewed tariff rhetoric, interdependence has become a source of leverage. Tariffs, export controls, sanctions, and regulatory barriers are now strategic tools. Canada has learned that heavy economic concentration, however friendly the partner, creates exposure. If access to the U.S. market can be politicized, then dependency becomes vulnerability. Carney's doctrine appears rooted in this lesson: reduce the risk before it is activated. The psychological shift in Ottawa. What is perhaps most significant is the psychological transformation within Canada's governing elite. For generations, Canada's strategy was quiet integration, align closely with Washington, shape American decisions from within the partnership, maintain harmony. But repeated tariff threats, even when temporary, have altered that confidence. Trust is not gone, but it is conditional. This is a critical turning point. Ottawa is no longer planning based on permanent predictability from Washington. Instead, it is preparing for cyclical volatility. Every U.S. election now carries economic implications for Canada. That realization changes long-term planning. Strategic diversification is not a reaction to a single administration. It is insurance against political oscillation. The economic battlefield. Tariffs as political instruments. Trump's renewed tariff discourse is framed domestically as protection for American industry. However, its external impact is profound. Canada's steel, aluminum, auto components, and critical mineral sectors are deeply integrated into American supply chains. Imposing tariffs disrupts not just Canadian exporters, but entire North American production ecosystems. Here lies the paradox. Punitive tariffs harm both sides, yet politically tariffs function as symbols of strength. They appeal to industrial constituencies. They project resolve. Carney's counter-strategy recognizes this dynamic. Instead of protesting tariffs as irrational, it assumes they may recur for domestic political reasons. Therefore, resilience must be built structurally, not negotiated case by case. Diversification becomes a strategic buffer against populist economic cycles. Energy as leverage in a fragmented world. Energy geopolitics amplifies this recalibration. Europe's energy crisis following the Ukraine conflict demonstrated how supply dependence can destabilize entire continents. Canada watched carefully. It recognized that energy exporters with diversified buyers hold stronger negotiating positions. If Canada can route liquefied natural gas to Europe or Asia, if its critical minerals power battery factories in Japan and Germany, then its economic gravity shifts outward. Energy ceases to be a continental tether. It becomes a global instrument. This is not anti-American. It is pro-optionality, and optionality equals leverage. Defense autonomy, and the Arctic chessboard. The Arctic dimension deserves deeper examination. As ice melts, the Arctic transforms from a frozen frontier into a navigable corridor rich in resources. Russia, China, the United States, and European powers are all positioning themselves. Canada's northern sovereignty has historically relied heavily on partnership with the U.S. through NORAD. But in a multipolar Arctic, Canada seeks a broader coalition of support, especially with European NATO states that share Arctic interests. Increased Canadian defense investment is not merely about military capacity. It is about diplomatic credibility. A country that contributes more to collective defense gains greater strategic voice. Carney's vision appears to understand that autonomy requires capability. You cannot claim sovereignty without the means to defend it. The domestic political calculus. This strategy also carries domestic political resonance within Canada. Canadian public opinion has shifted subtly in recent years. There is pride in independence, sensitivity to perceived disrespect, and growing appetite for diversified global engagement. If American rhetoric becomes dismissive or coercive, Canadian nationalism intensifies, not in hostility but in assertion. Carney's posture may therefore serve two audiences simultaneously. International partners seeking reliability, domestic voters seeking dignity. A sovereignty shield is not only economic policy, it is political narrative, the American debate, from leadership to isolation. Meanwhile, inside the United States, a debate unfolds. Some Americans increasingly question whether protectionism strengthens or isolates the country. The phrase America First was intended to signal renewal of domestic strength. Yet when allies diversify in response, critics argue it risks becoming America alone. Global influence historically depended on networks, trade agreements, defense alliances, financial systems. If partners hedge against U.S. unpredictability, American leverage may gradually erode, not dramatically, but incrementally. This is the unintended consequence dynamic. Coercion encourages autonomy. The limits of decoupling. However, realism must temper drama. Canada cannot decouple from the United States. Geography, infrastructure, and history bind the two economies together. The U.S. will remain Canada's largest trading partner for the foreseeable future. The objective, therefore, is not replacement. It is rebalancing, even modest diversification. From 75% for export concentration to 60% would significantly reduce vulnerability. The goal is risk mitigation, not separation. This nuance is essential. Financial strategy and currency dynamics. Another underexplored layer is financial architecture. The U.S. dollar dominates global trade and reserves. Any strategy to reduce dependency inevitably intersects with currency diversification, alternative financing networks, and deeper engagement with European and Asian financial institutions. Carney, with his background in central banking, understands monetary systems intimately. Strengthening ties with EU financial markets and Indo-Pacific investment flows may be part of a longer-term effort to dilute overexposure to U.S.-centric financial instruments. Financial diversification complements trade diversification. A middle power redefined. Historically, Canada has been described as a middle power, influential but not dominant. Carney's doctrine reframes that identity. Rather than passively navigating between superpowers, Canada seeks to actively construct multi-regional influence. It aims to become a connector state, bridging continents, facilitating energy flows, shaping climate finance, and mediating geopolitical tensions. This is middle power activism, not loud, not confrontational, but structurally transformative. The strategic gamble. Every grand strategy carries risk. If U.S. politics stabilize and tariff threats recede permanently, diversification investments may appear excessive. If global markets fragment further, new partnerships may not yield immediate returns. But from Ottawa's perspective, the greater risk lies in inaction. Dependence in an unpredictable era is dangerous. Preparation is insurance. The emerging North American equation. The long-term trajectory may not be confrontation, but renegotiated equilibrium. If Washington recognizes that heavy-handed economic pressure drives allies toward diversification, it may recalibrate. If Ottawa successfully strengthens alternative partnerships, it may negotiate with greater confidence. Paradoxically, Canada's sovereignty shield could ultimately stabilize the relationship by reducing asymmetry. Balanced partnerships endure longer than dependent ones. A turning point in strategic identity. This moment may be remembered not as a trade dispute, but as a psychological emancipation. Canada is not rejecting its southern neighbor. It is redefining the terms of engagement. And if Americans themselves begin questioning whether inward-looking nationalism reduces global influence, then both countries may be approaching a broader reckoning. The age of automatic trust has given way to strategic calculation. In that environment, Mark Carney's four-move counteroffensive represents something larger than policy. It represents a reimagining of Canada's place in the world, not sheltered beneath a superpower, not detached from it, but standing beside it, more independent, more networked, and far more prepared for a turbulent geopolitical future. As we conclude tonight's analysis, one thing is clear. The Canada-United States relationship is no longer operating on autopilot. What was once defined by unquestioned integration is now shaped by strategic reassessment. If tariff threats continue to reemerge as political instruments, Canada's diversification push may accelerate even further. If American nationalism continues to redefine Washington's global posture, allies will adapt accordingly. And if Mark Carney's four-move counter-strategy succeeds, Canada may emerge more independent, more networked, and more strategically resilient than at any point in recent history. But the bigger question remains, are we witnessing a temporary political cycle or the beginning of a permanent structural shift in North American relations? The answer will shape trade flows, defense alliances, energy markets, and global diplomacy for years to come. Here at Rapid Report, we remain committed to bringing you thoughtful, balanced, and forward-looking analysis on the stories that truly matter. If you found tonight's deep dive valuable, make sure you subscribe so you never miss our latest global updates. Like this video to support independent analysis and share it with others who want to understand not just what is happening, but why it matters. Your engagement helps this community grow and keeps informed conversation alive. Thank you for watching Rapid Report. Stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you in the next report.